6-year-old girl gives birth to 30 babies. This is a real story, but how did the whole thing start? To find out, watch the video to the end. But first, please subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications to get more stories like this. The tiny village of Santabella had always been a quiet, tucked-away haven where nothing extraordinary ever happened. Nestled in the heart of a lush, sprawling valley, its residents lived simple lives, bound together by tradition and an unwavering sense of community. But everything changed one fateful day in spring when a shocking revelation would plunge the village into chaos and place it on the map of global intrigue. It began with young Marisol, a sweet, wide-eyed girl who had just celebrated her 6th birthday. She was the daughter of Elena and Hector Ramirez, a couple known for their tireless work in the village's fields. Marisol was an ordinary child in every respect, playful, curious, and fond of collecting wildflowers near the riverbank. But in the months following her birthday, something strange began to happen. Elena was the first to notice. Marisol, once energetic and sprightly, had started to complain of fatigue. Her appetite dwindled, replaced by frequent bouts of nausea. Concerned, Elena took her to the village healer, Dona Rosa, a woman known for her herbal remedies and wisdom. Dona Rosa examined Marisol carefully, her weathered hands trembling as she pressed against the little girl's abdomen. "Impossible," Dona Rosa murmured under her breath, her face pale with shock. "What is it?" Elena demanded, her voice quaking. "What's wrong with my daughter?" Dona Rosa hesitated, unsure how to say the unthinkable. Finally, she leaned closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "Elena, she's pregnant." Elena recoiled, the words striking her like a physical blow. "That can't be. She's only a child." But Dona Rosa's diagnosis was unwavering, and soon the entire village buzzed with disbelief and speculation. Rumors spread like wildfire, each more outlandish than the last. Some claimed Marisol was cursed, others believed she had been chosen by divine forces. The once quiet streets of Santabella turned into a cacophony of whispers, with Marisol and her family at the center of it all. Dr. Alejandro Vargas, the town's only licensed physician, was summoned from the nearby city to confirm the healer's findings. His arrival marked a turning point in the unfolding mystery. With his modern equipment and no-nonsense demeanor, Dr. Vargas conducted a thorough examination of Marisol. To his astonishment, Dona Rosa's diagnosis was accurate. "This is unprecedented," he said during a tense meeting with the Ramirez family. "Medically, it's impossible for a child this young to conceive, let alone carry a pregnancy. We need to investigate further." The investigation drew experts from around the world. Scientists, journalists, religious leaders, and conspiracy theorists all flocked to Santabella. The tiny village became the epicenter of a global phenomenon, its dusty roads now lined with news vans and curious onlookers. Among the throng of new arrivals was Dr. Clara Monroe, a renowned geneticist who had spent her career studying rare anomalies in human reproduction. She approached the situation with a mixture of skepticism and fascination. Dr. Monroe was determined to uncover the truth, no matter how strange or implausible it seemed. As the pregnancy progressed, Marisol's condition became more complex. She experienced excruciating pain and periods of rapid growth that defied explanation. Her tiny body struggled under the strain, and the medical team worked tirelessly to keep her stable. Meanwhile, the Ramirez family faced relentless scrutiny, their every move dissected by a voracious media. Hector, a proud and stoic man, became increasingly protective of his daughter. He clashed with reporters and scientists alike, accusing them of treating Marisol like a specimen rather than a child. Elena, on the other hand, wrestled with guilt and fear, questioning whether she had unknowingly caused her daughter's condition. Adding to the tension were the varying motives of the people drawn to Santabella. Father Mateo, the village priest, saw Marisol as a miraculous sign from God and urged the community to embrace her as a symbol of hope. In contrast, a group of skeptics led by journalist Lisa Harrington accused the Ramirez family of orchestrating an elaborate hoax for fame and money. Even within the scientific community, opinions were divided. Dr. Monroe remained focused on the possibility of a groundbreaking genetic mutation, while Dr. Vargas leaned toward an environmental explanation, suspecting that exposure to unknown toxins in the valley might have triggered the anomaly. Through it all, Marisol remained a frightened and bewildered child. Her once innocent world had become a nightmare of cameras, needles, and whispered accusations. She clung to her parents for comfort, her small hands trembling as she endured endless tests and examinations. Then came the moment that would send shockwaves through the world. Marisol went into labor. The delivery was unlike anything the medical team had ever encountered. Over a grueling 72-hour period, Marisol gave birth to 30 tiny, perfectly formed babies. Each one was born prematurely yet alive, their cries filling the sterile hospital room with an eerie chorus. Doctors and nurses scrambled to save them, their hands shaking as they worked in a surreal frenzy. The babies, each weighing barely a pound, were placed in incubators specially brought in for the occasion. The medical team marveled at their resilience, but questions loomed larger than ever. How had Marisol's body sustained such a pregnancy? What were the long-term implications for both mother and children? And, most chillingly, what did this mean for the future of humanity? As the dust settled, the Ramirez family faced an even greater storm. Child Protective Services questioned their ability to care for Marisol and the newborns. Governments debated whether to intervene, citing concerns over the baby's welfare and the potential exploitation of their unique biology. Religious groups called for the children to be declared sacred, while others demanded they be studied for scientific advancement. Amidst the chaos, Marisol's health began to decline. Her frail body, already pushed to its limits, struggled to recover from the ordeal. The world watched with bated breath as doctors fought to save her, the outcome uncertain. But the mystery of Marisol and her 30 babies was far from over. Unbeknownst to anyone, a shadowy organization had taken a keen interest in the case. Their motives remained unclear, but one thing was certain. They would stop at nothing to uncover the secrets of Santabella's miraculous child. As the first light of dawn broke over Santabella, the village square teemed with activity. The air buzzed with tension as onlookers, both locals and visitors, gathered to discuss the miraculous yet baffling events. Meanwhile, in the hospital's sterile corridors, the Ramirez family clung to hope, though their faces betrayed the heavy toll of sleepless nights and relentless stress. Marisol lay pale and weak in her hospital bed, her tiny chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. Tubes and monitors surrounded her, each beep a haunting reminder of the precariousness of her condition. Elena sat at her daughter's bedside, stroking her hair and murmuring soft reassurances. Hector paced near the door, his fists clenched, barely containing his simmering frustration. Outside the room, Dr. Clara Monroe convened a meeting with the assembled specialists. The atmosphere was thick with tension as experts from diverse fields debated the implications of Marisol's unprecedented case. "We need to prioritize her recovery," Dr. Vargas said firmly, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "She's just a child. This has gone beyond science. It's about saving a life." "But what about the babies?" countered Dr. Patel, a neonatal specialist flown in from India. "Their survival depends on immediate, intensive care. We're dealing with 30 premature infants, an unheard-of scenario. The resources required are staggering." Dr. Monroe leaned forward, her sharp gaze piercing through the room. "We're not just talking about survival here. This case could rewrite everything we know about human reproduction and genetics. We need answers, and we need them now." The debate raged on, but it was clear that no consensus would be reached. The situation was unprecedented, and every decision carried immense ethical, medical, and emotional weight. In the midst of the chaos, Lisa Harrington, the relentless journalist who had been covering the story since its inception, sensed an opportunity. Her investigative instincts told her there was more to the story than what the world had been told. Lisa had managed to secure a brief interview with Elena under the guise of expressing sympathy. "Mrs. Ramirez," Lisa began gently, her voice laced with false warmth. "I can't imagine what you're going through. But the world deserves to know the truth. Has anything unusual happened in the past year? Anything that might explain Marisol's condition?" Elena hesitated, her eyes darting nervously. "No. Nothing unusual," she replied, but her trembling voice betrayed her. Lisa pressed on, her questions growing more pointed, until Hector stormed into the room, his face a mask of fury. "That's enough," he thundered, grabbing Lisa by the arm. "You think you can barge into our lives and dig for dirt? Get out." Lisa left, but not before catching a fleeting glance of fear in Elena's eyes. It was a look that confirmed her suspicions. There was a secret, and she was determined to uncover it. Back at the hospital, the babies presented their own set of mysteries. Despite being born prematurely, they exhibited signs of rapid development. Within days, their vital signs stabilized, and their growth outpaced expectations. Nurses reported that the infants displayed unusual behaviors. Some seemed eerily aware of their surroundings, while others produced sounds that resembled attempts at communication. Among the staff was Carla, a young nurse with a tender heart and a penchant for connecting with her patients. She was particularly drawn to one of the babies, a fragile boy with piercing amber eyes who rarely cried. Carla spent hours by his incubator, humming lullabies and marveling at his calm demeanor. She nicknamed him Solicito, or Little Sun, for the warmth she felt whenever she held him. But not all the staff shared Carla's sentiment. Dr. Edgar Reese, a pragmatic and somewhat cynical biologist, viewed the babies as anomalies to be studied rather than cherished. He proposed a series of invasive tests, arguing that the information gleaned could benefit humanity. His suggestions sparked outrage among the medical team, with Dr. Vargas leading the charge against him. "We're here to save lives, not exploit them," Dr. Vargas snapped during one heated exchange. "These are human beings, not lab rats." Meanwhile, the shadowy organization that had been quietly monitoring the situation made its first move. Late one night, a black van pulled up to the hospital's loading dock. Two figures dressed in dark clothing slipped inside, their movements swift and calculated. They bypassed security with ease, heading straight for the neonatal ward. Inside, Carla was finishing her shift when she noticed a flicker of movement on the surveillance monitor. Her heart raced as she saw the intruders approach the incubators. Without thinking, she grabbed a metal tray and slipped into the ward, determined to protect the babies. The confrontation was brief but intense. Carla managed to sound the alarm, and the intruders fled before security arrived. Though shaken, she refused to leave her post, vowing to watch over the babies like a mother bear guarding her cubs. The incident heightened tensions within the hospital. Dr. Monroe, ever the realist, suggested relocating the babies to a secure facility for further study. Hector and Elena, however, were adamantly opposed, insisting that the family remain together. As the days turned into weeks, the story grew even more convoluted. Father Mateo held a public vigil, urging the villagers to embrace the babies as a divine gift. "We must protect them," he declared to a rapt crowd. "They are a sign that God walks among us." But not everyone was convinced. A faction of villagers, led by a fiery skeptic named Tomas Delgado, accused the Ramirez family of bringing a curse upon Santabella. Tensions boiled over during a heated town meeting, culminating in a near riot that was quelled only by the intervention of local authorities. Amid the growing unrest, Marisol's condition worsened. Her fragile body seemed to wither before their eyes, and the doctors were at a loss. Dr. Vargas suspected that the strain of the pregnancy had triggered a rare autoimmune response, but no treatment seemed effective. Desperate for answers, Dr. Monroe proposed a radical solution: a full genetic analysis of both Marisol and the babies. It was a risky and invasive procedure, but it might hold the key to understanding the phenomenon. After much deliberation, the Ramirez family agreed. The results of the analysis were nothing short of staggering. Marisol's DNA contained sequences that were entirely unrecognizable, as if they had been altered by an unknown force. The babies, too, displayed genetic markers that defied explanation. Dr. Monroe's excitement was palpable, but her discoveries only deepened the mystery. As the world watched with bated breath, the Ramirez family faced a choice that would change their lives, and possibly the course of human history, forever. The results of Marisol's genetic analysis sent shockwaves through the scientific community. Dr. Monroe held an emergency press conference, her voice steady but tinged with awe as she addressed the world. "What we have here is unprecedented," she began, the room falling silent. "Marisol and her children possess genetic markers that do not align with anything we've cataloged in human DNA. We are looking at a phenomenon that could redefine our understanding of biology." The news ignited a firestorm of debate. Religious leaders hailed Marisol as evidence of divine intervention, while skeptics accused the scientific team of fabricating the results. Governments scrambled to assert jurisdiction over the case, each claiming a vested interest in the well-being of the Ramirez family and the enigmatic babies. Protesters gathered outside the hospital, their signs ranging from messages of support to ominous warnings about meddling in matters beyond human comprehension. Inside the hospital, tensions reached a breaking point. Hector, already on edge, had taken to standing guard outside Marisol's room, his distrust of outsiders growing by the hour. Elena, consumed with worry, spent her days praying at her daughter's bedside, her whispered pleas a haunting soundtrack to the unfolding chaos. Meanwhile, Dr. Monroe and Dr. Vargas found themselves at odds over the next steps. Dr. Monroe, ever the scientist, pushed for a deeper dive into the genetic anomalies. She argued that the potential breakthroughs in medicine and human evolution were too significant to ignore. Dr. Vargas, on the other hand, prioritized the immediate well-being of Marisol and the babies, urging caution in the face of the unknown. "We're not dealing with numbers on a chart," Dr. Vargas said during one heated argument. "These are real people. A little girl is fighting for her life, and 30 infants need care, not experiments. And what happens if we ignore this opportunity? Dr. Monroe shot back. What if these anomalies hold the key to curing diseases, extending life, or even understanding our place in the universe? We have a responsibility to explore this. The debate was interrupted by an urgent call from the neonatal ward. One of the babies, Solicito, had stopped breathing. Nurses scrambled to revive him, their hands shaking as they worked against the clock. Carla, the young nurse who had grown attached to the infant, refused to leave his side, tears streaming down her face as she whispered words of encouragement. After what felt like an eternity, Solicito let out a weak but unmistakable cry. Relief washed over the room, but the scare served as a stark reminder of the fragility of the situation. The medical team redoubled their efforts, implementing round-the-clock monitoring and reinforcing security measures to prevent another incident like the break-in. Despite these precautions, the shadowy organization continued to lurk in the background, their motives shrouded in mystery. They sent cryptic messages to Dr. Monroe, hinting at knowledge that could unlock the secrets of Marisol's condition. Torn between her scientific curiosity and her ethical responsibilities, Dr. Monroe struggled to decide whether to engage with them. As if the situation wasn't complex enough, a new player entered the fray: Dr. Anton Riker, a controversial figure in the field of bioengineering. Known for his radical theories and morally ambiguous methods, Dr. Riker claimed to have insights that could explain the anomalies. His arrival sparked outrage among the medical team, particularly Dr. Vargas, who accused him of exploiting the situation for personal gain. "You're not here to help," Dr. Vargas said during a tense confrontation. "You're here to make a name for yourself no matter the cost." Dr. Riker smirked, his confidence unshaken. "And what if my theories are correct? What if I can offer answers where you see only questions?" The Ramirez family, already overwhelmed, found themselves caught in the crossfire of competing agendas. Hector's distrust of outsiders deepened, and he began making plans to move his family to a safe location, away from the prying eyes of the world. But Elena, ever the voice of reason, urged him to reconsider. "If we run now, we'll never find peace," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "We need to face this head-on for Marisol's sake." Their discussions were interrupted by Marisol herself, who had grown increasingly aware of the chaos surrounding her. Though weak, she managed to speak in a faint voice that carried an unexpected clarity. "Why is everyone fighting?" she asked, her wide eyes filled with innocence. "I just want to go home." Her words struck a chord, momentarily silencing the arguments and debates. Even Dr. Monroe, who had been relentless in her pursuit of answers, felt a pang of guilt. She knelt beside Marisol's bed, her expression softening. "I'm sorry, Marisol," she said gently. "We're trying to help you. I promise." But promises were hard to keep in a situation as volatile as this. Just as the medical team began to regroup, the hospital was rocked by another crisis. A massive power outage plunged the building into darkness, cutting off life support to the neonatal ward. Panic ensued as doctors and nurses scrambled to manually ventilate the babies and stabilize the systems. Amid the chaos, Carla noticed something extraordinary. Despite the lack of support, Solicito's incubator glowed faintly, as if emitting its own light. The baby's tiny body seemed to pulse with an inner energy, his breathing steady even as the others struggled. Carla's heart raced as she realized that Solicito might hold the key to understanding the anomalies, but at what cost? As power was eventually restored, the hospital staff and the Ramirez family were left reeling from yet another unexplained event. The world outside grew increasingly impatient for answers, and the shadowy organization moved closer to revealing its hand. But Marisol's condition continued to deteriorate and time was running out. Every decision carried unimaginable stakes, and the line between right and wrong blurred with each passing day. The power outage marked a turning point, pushing the hospital staff and the Ramirez family to their emotional and physical limits. Hector, once a pillar of strength, now found himself overwhelmed by a sense of helplessness. He stayed by Marisol's side, gripping her small hand as if his determination alone could anchor her to life. But Marisol's condition was deteriorating rapidly. Her frail body seemed to be shutting down, the strain of her extraordinary ordeal proving too much for her young age. The medical team worked tirelessly, cycling through treatments in a desperate bid to stabilize her, but her vitals continued to decline. Dr. Vargas convened the specialists in the hospital's conference room, his voice heavy with frustration and urgency. "We're running out of options," he said, pacing the room. "If we don't find a way to stabilize her soon, we're going to lose her." Dr. Monroe, though deeply concerned, refused to abandon hope. She held up a series of genetic reports, pointing to the anomalies that had already rewritten their understanding of biology. "There's something in her DNA, something unprecedented," she argued. "We need to explore every avenue, even if it means unconventional methods." Dr. Riker leaned back in his chair, his sharp features illuminated by the dim conference room light. "Unconventional methods are my specialty," he said with a smirk, drawing glares from nearly everyone at the table. "What if I told you I have a way to not only save Marisol but unlock the full potential of her unique biology?" "At what cost?" snapped Dr. Vargas, slamming his palm on the table. "She's a child, not a test subject." But Riker's words hung in the air, planting seeds of doubt and curiosity in the minds of those present. Even Dr. Monroe, who had been wary of Riker's methods, found herself considering his proposal. The stakes were too high to dismiss any possibility outright. Meanwhile, back in the neonatal ward, the 30 babies continued to defy expectations. Solicito, in particular, had become the focus of growing fascination. His ability to emit light during the power outage was not an isolated incident. Over the following days, staff reported witnessing subtle but unmistakable signs of advanced cognition and development among the infants. Carla, who had grown fiercely protective of Solicito, began to notice patterns in his behavior. He seemed to respond to her voice in ways that went beyond instinct, almost as if he understood her words. She confided her observations to Dr. Monroe, who immediately ordered a series of non-invasive tests to study the phenomenon. The results were staggering. Solicito's brain activity showed levels of complexity more typical of a child several years older. His neural pathways appeared to be developing at an accelerated rate, and his genetic profile bore striking similarities to Marisol's. "This isn't evolution," Dr. Monroe said during a late-night brainstorming session with her colleagues. "It's something entirely new. These children, especially Solicito, may represent a leap forward in human potential, but not everyone saw the anomalies as a blessing." The shadowy organization, which had been monitoring the situation from the periphery, finally made its move. Under the cover of darkness, they infiltrated the hospital once again, this time with a clear objective: to take Solicito and as many of the other babies as they could. The raid was swift and surgical. Armed with advanced technology, the operatives neutralized the hospital's security systems and made their way to the neonatal ward. Carla, who had been on night duty, awoke to the sound of muffled footsteps and the unmistakable click of metal against glass. Her heart raced as she realized what was happening. Without hesitation, Carla activated the emergency alarm and rushed to protect Solicito. She found the operatives already at the incubator, their hands reaching for the infant. Fueled by a surge of maternal instinct, she threw herself at them, screaming for help. The commotion alerted hospital security, who arrived just in time to prevent the operatives from escaping with the babies. The raid left the hospital shaken and exposed. It was clear that the Ramirez family and the medical team were dealing with forces far beyond their understanding. Hector and Elena, now more determined than ever to protect their children, began exploring options to relocate the family to a safe house. But even as they planned their escape, a new crisis emerged. Marisol's condition took a dramatic turn for the worse. Her breathing became labored, her pulse weak and erratic. Dr. Vargas and Dr. Monroe worked frantically to stabilize her, but nothing seemed to work. Then, in a moment of desperation, Hector made a startling decision. He approached Dr. Riker, the man he had distrusted from the beginning, and begged him for help. "You said you had a way to save her," Hector said, his voice trembling. "I don't care what it takes. Just save my daughter." Riker's expression softened, a rare glimmer of empathy crossing his face. "It won't be easy," he warned. "And there are risks, unknown risks. But if you're willing to try, I'll do everything I can." The procedure Riker proposed was experimental and dangerous. It involved introducing a synthetic compound designed to interact with Marisol's unique DNA, potentially enhancing her body's ability to heal itself. The medical team debated the ethics and feasibility of the procedure, but time was running out. Elena, her eyes filled with tears, knelt beside her daughter's bed and whispered, "Hold on, Mija. Just hold on a little longer." As the preparations for the procedure began, Solicito's incubator began to emit its mysterious glow once again. Carla, who had stayed by his side, noticed something extraordinary. The other babies were responding to the light, their tiny bodies seeming to draw strength from it. The connection between Marisol and her children had always been a source of wonder, but now it seemed to hold the key to her survival. Dr. Monroe theorized that the baby's unique biology might contain the answers they had been searching for all along. With time running out, the team made a fateful decision. They would use the genetic material from Solicito and his siblings to create a treatment for Marisol, hoping it would trigger the same resilience that had kept the infants alive against all odds. As the world watched and waited, the Ramirez family faced the most harrowing chapter of their journey yet. The procedure would either save Marisol or end in tragedy, and the outcome would shape the future not just of their family but possibly of humanity itself. The atmosphere in the hospital was electric with tension as the medical team prepared for the groundbreaking procedure. Marisol's fragile body lay still on the operating table, surrounded by machines that beeped in rhythmic warning. Hector stood just outside the observation window, his knuckles white as he gripped the metal frame. Elena, trembling but resolute, clung to her rosary, whispering fervent prayers under her breath. Dr. Monroe and Dr. Riker worked side by side, a reluctant partnership forged by necessity. They had crafted a treatment derived from Solicito's genetic material, synthesizing it into a serum that they hoped would interact with Marisol's altered DNA. The procedure had never been attempted before and the risks were monumental. But there was no other option. This could save her, or it could do nothing at all, Dr. Monroe said, her voice low but steady. Riker, ever the pragmatist, added, or it could accelerate the damage. We're venturing into completely uncharted territory here. As the serum was injected into Marisol's arm, the room fell silent. The medical team held their breath, monitoring her vitals with laser focus. For several agonizing minutes, nothing happened. Then a sudden spike on the monitors jolted everyone to attention. Her heart rate is stabilizing, Dr. Vargas announced, his voice tinged with cautious optimism. Elena and Hector watched through the glass, their hands clasped together in silent hope. Marisol's small chest began to rise and fall in a more regular rhythm, her skin taking on a faint flush of color. The serum was working, at least for now. But the relief was short-lived. Just as the medical team began to document the results, Marisol's body convulsed violently. Alarms blared and the monitors flashed erratic readings. Dr. Monroe barked orders, and the room erupted into controlled chaos as the team fought to stabilize her. "She's rejecting the serum," one nurse shouted. "No," Riker said sharply, his eyes locked on the monitors. "This isn't rejection, it's transformation." Before anyone could respond, a phenomenon unlike anything they had ever seen unfolded. Marisol's body began to emit a soft, golden glow, similar to the light Carla had observed from Solicito's incubator. The glow intensified, enveloping the room in a warm, ethereal radiance. The medical team froze, their expressions a mixture of awe and fear. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the light faded. The monitors returned to normal and Marisol's breathing stabilized. Her eyes fluttered open and for the first time in weeks she looked alert. "Mama," she whispered, her voice weak but clear. Elena rushed into the room, tears streaming down her face as she embraced her daughter. Hector followed, his usually stoic demeanor crumbling as he kissed Marisol's forehead. The medical team watched in stunned silence, unable to comprehend what had just occurred. But the victory was bittersweet. While Marisol's condition had improved dramatically, the procedure had left her physically changed. Her once brown eyes now glowed faintly amber, matching Solicito's. Her skin seemed to shimmer under the fluorescent lights, and her movements carried a grace that was almost otherworldly. "She's stable," Dr. Monroe confirmed, breaking the silence. "But she's not the same. The serum didn't just heal her, it altered her." The implications were staggering. If Marisol's transformation was a result of the serum interacting with her unique DNA, what did that mean for her future? And what about the babies whose genetic material had made the treatment possible? Questions multiplied, but answers remained elusive. The Ramirez family, now reunited, had little time to process these developments. News of Marisol's miraculous recovery spread quickly, reigniting the global frenzy. Crowds gathered outside the hospital, their chants ranging from adulation to condemnation. Religious leaders proclaimed Marisol a saint, while conspiracy theorists accused the family of harboring a dangerous secret. Amid the chaos, the shadowy organization made another move. This time they didn't rely on stealth. A team of operatives in black SUVs arrived at the hospital in broad daylight, escorted by heavily armed guards. They carried official-looking documents and demanded access to Marisol and the babies, claiming they were acting under orders from a top-secret government agency. Hector met them at the hospital entrance, his broad frame blocking the doorway. "You're not taking my family," he growled, his voice like steel. The leader of the operatives, a tall, imposing woman named Agent Silas, stepped forward. Her piercing blue eyes locked onto Hector's. "Mr. Ramirez, this isn't a request. It's a matter of national security." Hector refused to budge, but the standoff was interrupted by Dr. Monroe, who stepped between them. "Agent Silas, you don't understand what you're dealing with," she said, her tone firm but measured. "These children aren't weapons or experiments. They're human beings." Silas smirked. "Human beings who could change the course of history. We're not here to harm them, we're here to ensure their potential is realized." The argument escalated, drawing the attention of the growing crowd outside. Protesters surged against the barriers, their chants growing louder as the tension mounted. Inside the hospital, Carla and the other staff worked frantically to move the babies to a secure location, fearing that another raid was imminent. As the situation spiraled out of control, Marisol, still weak but now fully conscious, stepped out of her room. Her glowing amber eyes scanned the scene, and she raised her hand, her voice carrying a calm authority that belied her age. "Stop," she said, and the room fell silent. Everyone turned to look at her, parents, doctors, agents, and protesters alike. Marisol's presence seemed to command attention, her small frame radiating a quiet power. She took a step forward, her movements graceful yet deliberate. "You're all fighting over me and my brothers and sisters," she said, her voice steady. "But none of you are listening to us. We're not here to hurt anyone. We just want to live." Her words sent a ripple through the crowd, silencing even the most fervent protesters. For a moment, it seemed as though Marisol's plea might bring peace. But the shadowy organization had other plans. Agent Silas raised her hand, signaling her operatives. "Take her," she ordered. What happened next would change everything. As the agents moved toward Marisol, the 30 babies began to cry in unison, their wails echoing through the hospital. The air grew thick with an unexplainable energy, and the room was bathed in golden light. The babies' cries seemed to amplify, resonating deep within the hearts of everyone present. Even the operatives froze, their expressions shifting from determination to awe. Marisol turned to face her siblings, her amber eyes glowing brighter than ever. "We're stronger together," she whispered. And then, something extraordinary happened. The golden light filling the hospital grew brighter, pulsating in waves that seemed to carry warmth and calmness. The cries of the 30 babies weren't just cries anymore, they carried a resonance that reverberated in the hearts and minds of everyone present. Protesters outside the hospital stopped shouting, their signs lowering as they gazed at the building in awe. Inside, the tension dissipated like mist under the sun. Marisol, standing at the center of the phenomenon, seemed transformed. Her glowing amber eyes scanned the room, filled with wisdom far beyond her years. She extended her small hands outward, and the light intensified, wrapping around her parents, the doctors, and even Agent Silas and her operatives. "No more fighting," Marisol said, her voice echoing with a melodic, otherworldly quality. "We are here for a reason, but it's not to be feared or controlled. We are part of something bigger, something meant to bring understanding and hope." The light reached out like tendrils, touching each of the 30 babies in their incubators. As it did, their cries turned to soft coos, their tiny faces peaceful. Carla, who had been clutching Solicito close to her chest, felt an overwhelming sense of serenity wash over her. She looked down to see Solicito smiling, his eyes meeting hers with an unspoken message of gratitude. Agent Silas, frozen in place, seemed to struggle against the overwhelming force of the light. But as it enveloped her, her stern demeanor melted away. Her piercing blue eyes softened, and she dropped the document she had been holding. For the first time, doubt flickered across her face. Dr. Monroe, tears streaming down her cheeks, whispered, This isn't science. This is something divine." The energy in the room peaked, and then, slowly, it began to dissipate. The golden light faded, leaving behind a profound silence. Marisol swayed on her feet, and Hector rushed forward to catch her. She looked up at him with a tired but serene smile. "It's okay now, Papa," she said softly. "They understand." Agent Silas stepped forward, her hands raised in a gesture of surrender. "I don't know what just happened," she said, her voice unsteady. "But I know one thing, I was wrong. We were all wrong." She turned to the Ramirez family, her expression filled with something almost like reverence. "You're not a threat. You're a gift. We'll leave you in peace." True to her word, Silas and her operatives withdrew, their black SUVs disappearing into the distance. The crowd outside the hospital dispersed, their anger and curiosity replaced by a quiet sense of wonder. The story of Marisol and her 30 siblings would live on, But for now, the family was granted the privacy they so desperately needed. In the weeks that followed, Marisol's recovery continued. Though she remained physically changed, she showed no signs of illness or weakness. The 30 babies, too, thrived under the care of Carla and the hospital staff. Their extraordinary development continued, but their bond with Marisol became even more evident. Whenever she visited the neonatal ward, the infants would respond to her presence with joy, their tiny hands reaching out as if recognizing her as their guide and protector. Dr. Monroe and Dr. Vargas agreed to keep the details of Marisol's condition and the baby's unique biology confidential. They destroyed the remaining serum, ensuring that it would never be used for experimentation. Dr. Riker, though disappointed, ultimately respected their decision and quietly left Santabella to continue his work elsewhere. As for the Ramirez family, they returned to their humble home in the village, seeking to rebuild their lives away from the spotlight. Though their journey had been fraught with challenges, they emerged stronger, united by a bond that no outside force could break. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the valley in hues of gold and crimson, Marisol sat on the porch with her parents. Solicito, now healthy and growing rapidly like his siblings, sat in her lap, cooing softly. Hector wrapped an arm around Elena, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "Do you think this is the end of it?" Hector asked, his voice low. Elena smiled, her gaze resting on Marisol. "No, mi amor," she said. "This is only the beginning." Marisol looked up at the sky, her amber eyes reflecting the fading sunlight. She didn't know what the future held, but she felt a deep sense of peace. Whatever came next, she knew she wouldn't face it alone. Far away, in a hidden laboratory, a group of scientists pored over data collected during the events at Santabella. Their faces were grim, their discussions hushed. The world might have forgotten about Marisol and her siblings, but not everyone had. The mysteries they represented were too profound to ignore, and the questions they raised too tantalizing to leave unanswered. But for now, in the quiet valley of Santabella, a little girl and her family embraced the miracle of life and the hope it brought to a world desperate for understanding.